Hey, guys. Welcome back to Out of Left Field. Graham and Chris here with you. Finally getting back to, the last couple of days of baseball, man. I know we had a pretty somber show last week, and we will touch very briefly on the way that the first game back to the Marlins, happened and all the real poetry and beauty that is baseball. But, man, a ton of stuff to get to. I know we're a little bit late, but Jacob deGrom gets injured, which is going to obviously affect the playoff picture as we get down to the last couple of days. We've got the Clevenger comments, things that we just didn't really think were going to, be a fair thing to talk about on such a rough weekend in baseball last week. So, man, let's put the ball in play and get after it. The Marlins play their first game against the Mets this past Monday. I know, unfortunately, that you were in class, which after we started talking about it was probably the worst place that you could have been. But, man, there really is a beauty in sports, and especially in baseball, that, like you said before, life oftentimes it's way more important than sports. And sports is supposed to be a way for you to get away from what's happening in life. We saw that in 2001, what it's meant, when President Bush threw out the first pitch in Yankee Stadium and all that kind of stuff. And there are certain times when the game rises to the occasion of the events that life is throwing at you. And Monday was a clear and convincing, point of that. I mean, and you and I have unfortunately heard a single trumpet play taps or even echo taps when there's a second just behind it. And we don't want to have to think about what it was for, but to hear that solo trumpet play Take Me Out to the Ballgame of all things, and then for D. Gordon to come up and hit that solo shot with as emotionally wrecked as he was, man, just what a beautiful night in baseball and what it meant to a community and to that team. I have no problem saying that I cried when it happened. It's why baseball is America's pastime, man.
Yeah, I agree. It was an incredible game. It was an incredible opening ceremony. It was the jersey retirement ceremony where the entire team comes out wearing the Fernandez number 16 jersey. I had anticipated all of them wearing the number 16. I did not expect all of them to have a Fernandez jersey on. That was pretty powerful. That huddle they did around the
mound, yeah.
The mound, sorry, where guys were signing their names in the mound, writing messages in the mound. It was all in all, it was just a pretty incredible display. And then that first bat, D. Gordon's first bat, right? He comes in, he takes the ceremonial sort of pitch wearing Jose Fernandez's batting helmet from the right side of the plate.
Mimicking his stance. It was...
Right.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool. The umpires, John Hirschbeck, said they could have pretty much gotten away with just about anything they wanted to do that night. He said I was as emotionally drained as those guys were. And you got to think every pitch they know the importance of that, and by every single person involved, it was beautiful.
Yeah, and then to see D. Gordon come over to the other side of the plate where he typically stands and then just take Bartolo Colon ridiculously
mile.
Deep.
Yeah, let's not go yards, go mile. That thing was with a moonshot, and it was.
Not only his first home run of the season, but his longest home run of his career.
Yeah. And I heard one of the announcers say, I thought it was kind of a neat concept had it happened, is how, I don't think ironic is the right word, but kind of fitting if Ichiro Suzuki's jersey had been the number 16 and it had said Jose.
Right.
Because we've seen, his first name has always been there. So yeah, it was awesome, man. It really is. It's things that you really can't write, you can't script, and it's what makes that game Just so beautiful. And I know that we talked about some people thinking that the Mets threw that game, which makes absolutely no sense because right now they're one game up on the Giants for the top wild card spot, and the Cardinals are one game back of the Giants. So there's a tight race in both wild cards. The wild cards now are really, the important race, and the beauty of it is even without the second wild card right now, this wild card race would be, extremely exciting down the stretch the next couple of days. And
the Mets are only 2 games out, so.
Yeah, and that and the Mets now all of a sudden. Exactly, and we keep seeing pitching issues. We've seen Syndergaard who pitched Tuesday for the Mets, and done a very touching tribute to Fernandez, saying how bittersweet it is. It's kind of hard to be pitching on Jose's mound, but we know he's complained of some elbow soreness, a little bit of forearm discomfort. Matt Harvey, we've already discussed that multiple times on this show over the last 5 or 6 months. And now Jacob deGrom goes out with an ulnar nerve issue, which obviously the UCL, the ulnar collateral ligament, is, that's synonymous with Tommy John surgery, which he's already had. Now, you did some looking. Numbness, discomfort, very similar things that we heard from Matt Harvey with thoracic outlet syndrome, but in this case, it's the ulnar nerve that was bothering him, and the doctors removed it. But Chris, tell us why was that nerve removed in the first place?
Well, here's the thing. So while there's no damage to that repaired UCL, scar tissue from that Tommy John surgery in 2010 that deGrom had built up around the elbow and resulted in a pinching of that UCL nerve. So they removed the nerve, which, good, bad, or indifferent, it'll hopefully solve the numbness, tingling, and pain issues. It's going to take him 3 months to recover, so he's done for the season and the postseason. He's not going to play again. He will be available more than likely when pitchers and catchers report in February. He should get all of his regular training done for next season. But the problem that I have with this whole thing is that now this is the second pitcher that we've heard from the Mets, Matt Harvey being the first, that has tried to pitch through pain, tried to pitch through numbness or tingling, and not told the team about it until it got so bad that they had to go onto the DL. Jacob deGrom said that he'd been pitching through numbness in his fingers for 5 or 6 starts, but he didn't tell anybody until he left on September 1st against the Marlins. That's ridiculous. These guys are being paid hundreds of millions of dollars to pitch. If something is wrong, they need to let the team know immediately.
For sure. And, I think the scary thing is, and again, very similar to what it sounded like, when we talked about Matt Harvey, is that you've got a guy who is, throwing high 90s. That's really been, the benchmark of that staff, who, if you're having numbness, then you're not in control. And I don't think anybody wants to wear, a Jacob deGrom fastball, especially when it's unintentional. And then there's the consequences of, then we start getting, retaliation pitches. So, I don't know, maybe it's just because it's New York and, everything in the media is made much bigger than maybe it needs to be. But is there a concerning trend here? Because this goes beyond just being a gamer and wanting to stay. This isn't the NFL where, hey, my ankle is sprained, but I can make it. This is a guy that's hurling, a pretty hefty piece of, of rawhide, down 60 feet, 6 inches into a catcher's mitt, trying to, put the ball over a 17-inch, area of space. So is this an issue with an organizational thing, or is this just guys that you want to say, man, they just want to be out there with their guys, and they're making more of a selfish decision to not say anything because they don't want to be off the field.
I don't think it's organizational. I think that it's starting to become an epidemic in the entire league. This is not something we just see with pitchers. We've seen other guys play through pain. Buster Posey played through a back strain for most of this season. It affected his numbers. It affected how he played the game in the second half. Joe Panic played through a similar injury. Guys on other teams have played. Trout played through some back pain. I mean, even Albert Pujols, who traditionally will come off the field if he, packs his thumb a little bit too hard, has been trying to play through some different aches and pains this season.
Well, he has severe plantar fasciitis in his feet. I mean, it's very similar to what we're seeing with David Ortiz. I mean, the pain that he's feeling is large.
Right. Yeah. And Albert Pujols is 1.5 million years old, so I understand that he doesn't want to try to, but he's been trying to play through that pain this season and not saying anything about it. And one of the perfect examples to me is Drew Pomeranz. Drew Pomeranz played through pain in San Diego, and San Diego says that he didn't say anything until it got really bad. Now, we know that San Diego's having some issues with their medical disclosures, but Pomeranz came to Boston and played through pain and didn't tell Boston either. And now Drew Pomeranz, who cost the Red Sox quite a bit in the long run, is not going to start another game this season.
Now, I want to ask you one question before I get on this with you. How old are you, Chris?
I'm 33.
33, okay. So does that mean that you're 1 million years old? Because Albert Pujols is just 36.
Yeah, I'm 1 million, maybe 1.25 million.
In
baseball years. In baseball years.
Well,
talking about a guy that only the longest of the long play until 41. I mean, when a guy hits 40 in baseball, we start talking about how he should probably be a manager and not a player.
Right.
So 36 is ancient.
True. Now, in answer to what you were saying, so far, Anderson Espinoza, who the Red Sox traded, ended, especially the last month and a half of his season with a 5.31 ERA. His numbers weren't great. He was 4.49. He was 6-11 on the year, and that's who the Sox gave up to get Pomeranz. Now, Pomeranz is, he's close to 100 innings above his highest. His highest he's ever pitched was 86. That was in 2015. He's at 169 and a third. So we had talked about this for a while, and we've discussed our concerns with him. It makes me wonder if part of these issues are why he was leaving so many pitches up in the zone.
Right.
So now John Farrell, he was scratched from his start yesterday. Any additional time that we're going to see him was going to be out of the bullpen. So the last thing that you really wanted to see is, hey, we get this guy to bolster our rotation, and now we can't put him in the rotation, so what do? Put in Clay Buchholz?
Right, exactly.
Now granted, the Sox were on an 11-game winning streak until they lost to New York one or two nights ago, and they've clinched, all the American League. Actually, every team has clinched the division. So division rounds are set. We're waiting for the wild card stuff.
They got blown out and clinched on the same night.
Yeah, it was one of those, hey, let's hang our heads on the field and let's celebrate in the clubhouse.
Which is almost as bad as when about 2 nights later, with last night actually, the Yankees again blew out the Red Sox and were mathematically eliminated from the playoffs on the same night.
in relation to our picks, we really screwed the pooch on the Giants. I mean, I really thought that they were going to find their stroke, and they never did. The Dodgers clinched. Obviously, the Cubs and the Nats was a pretty easy pick for us.
Yeah.
We had the Red Sox right. Been impressed. The Indians and the Rangers. Indians now are really starting to see some pitching issues, which is going to affect them. We'll discuss that coming into next week with the wild card games. And the wild card is still wide open. But man, it makes you worry because, granted, Rick Porcello, who Jason Stark said was the Cy Young secret agent, kind of the sleeper pick, who we said early on we thought would be the Cy Young winner, is pitching well. David Price is still trying to kind of find himself, but he's pitching relatively well. You have Stephen Wright. But, I mean, dude, Texas is you have two number one pitchers in Hamels and Yu Darvish. So, I mean, at some point, I don't know if this is really going to affect Boston deep because their bats are so hot, but if they start meeting teams and they start buzzsawing those sticks, you got to rely on arms, and their arms just have not been reliable this year.
Right. And I want to caveat a little bit. When the trade was made with for Drew Pomeranz with the Padres, you could look at the stat line and say it makes sense. He had 102 innings with San Diego, had started 17 games, had gotten decisions in all but 2 of those games, 8 wins, 7 losses, and he had a 2.47 ERA through those 17 games. So you look at that stat line and you're like, okay. But since he came to Boston, the guy's got a 4.68 ERA. So he started 13 games. He's only struck out 69 and 67 innings, whereas he had struck out 115 and 102 in San Diego. His strikeouts per 9 have dropped a full strikeout per 9 innings. And
his ERA exploded.
His ERA exploded, and he's only going about 5 innings a game now. So you're talking about a guy who in his entire career has pitched 461 games, and in this season alone, 461 innings.
Yeah,
461 innings, and in this season alone has pitched well over a quarter of that.
Right, and it's unfortunate that his numbers when he came over just never came close to reflecting, why they wanted to trade him, which obviously goes back to our news a few weeks ago about the Padres issue, and that's why the sanctions had been brought down on the general manager and all that because of this deal.
Right. And, I understand knowing what they knew, seeing what they saw, why the Red Sox went after Drew Pomeranz. Before the trade deadline, he looked like a pitcher you'd want to go after.
Yeah, and the price tag wasn't much. A low A prospect player for a guy who's showing himself to be relatively decent in a team that's trying to rebuild. Right. It was a smart trade. Definitely we can't knock him for that because you're able to pay a little to get what you hope is going to be enough to give you a solid 5, 6, maybe 7 innings if you're fortunate.
Unfortunately, they haven't been fortunate, and part of that's on Pomeranz for doing the same thing that DeGrom and Harvey did, not reporting that he was hurt, trying to play through pain. But a lot of that is on the Padres for fraudulently presenting him as a healthy player. So, unfortunately for Boston, they got the short end of that stick. Drew Pomeranz has now been ruled out as a starter through the rest of the regular season and the postseason. If he pitches again, the report says he will pitch only from the bullpen.
Yeah.
Not good.
You guys, again, want to apologize if we're getting any technical difficulties here. We're doing the show. Everything is kind of done online here when we call in because we're two different sides of the country. So if you ever get a little bit of feedback from me, I know we had some feedback on the ad interview, which is unfortunate on that end. I know Chris's mic has been a little bit funky, so if you're getting that, we apologize. Again, guys, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at OOLeftField, and also check us out on Facebook, Out of Left Field, hosted by Graham and Chris. We've got some new stuff coming up for you soon. Hopefully going to have an interview coming up next week. We're still trying to finalize the details on that, so don't want to put that out there in case the person that we're trying to get is unable to do it. And then also, like we said, Gary Darling of Umps Care Charities. And eventually we will be having, for those of you who are umpires or are interested in umpiring, as Chris has told me that he is CEO of Umpire Jim Kirk. And also Scott Kennedy should be joining us here in the next month or so. We've got a ton of new gear coming out, new stuff from Force 3, which proud to report Jason Klein, the creator and CEO of Force 3, is slowly recovering from the horrific plane crash that he was in, but some new gear coming from them. New Balance has some new stuff coming out, so really excited about those guys.
Some really comfortable looking new stuff actually from New Balance.
Yeah, they're more of a high gloss shoe, so a little bit less polishing. I'm definitely, from what I've seen, I like the mid cut a lot more, but you're really going to be some impressive stuff. So again, Out of Left Field, hosted by Graham and Chris. Check out them, umpattire.com. You can also follow them on Twitter or on Instagram at umpattire.com. And also, if you want to check out any of our former interviews or shows, our interview with Chip Carey or Jerry Davis, Major League umpire, or Adnan Virk, check us out on Facebook, Out of Left Field, hosted by Graham and Chris. I believe our Jerry Davis coupon code might still work for 15% off. Give it a shot. It's LEFT, L-E-F-T. So we kind of, as we move from Pomeranz and talking about guys who aren't playing too much but have kind of been at the center of controversy, for lack of a better term, there was a gentleman that plays for a team that was in your backyard for a little while when you were stationed at now Joint Base Lewis McChord, but Fort Lewis, home of the 2nd Infantry Division, your home for quite a while. That
almost
man
6 years.
Took over the news for a while, and that, of course, for those of you who haven't heard, was Seattle Mariners catcher Steve Clevenger. Now, I mentioned this to you last week, and thankfully we had a few days to try and digest what was said before we started reporting on it, and then, of course, everything changed, so we're coming at it now. Mariners suspended Clevenger immediately for the rest of the season, and this came after a string of tweets in reference to the protests in Charlotte and the issues that were happening in Charlotte, North Carolina, because of the officer-involved shooting there of an African-American man. And in his tweets, he said, "Black people beating whites when a thug got shot holding a gun by a black officer. Ha ha. Bleep. Stuff cracks me up. Keep kneeling for the anthem. Black Lives Matter is pathetic once again. Obama, you are pathetic once again. Everyone involved should be locked behind bars like animals." End quote of his tweet. Obviously we are not advocating any religious belief here. We're not advocating any political stance. But, man, that's charged. I don't want to say racially charged. I mean, you grew up in Sacramento, obviously a lot more diverse of an area than I did. Although I went to a school that we were pretty well even between all groups. But I read this. I mean, I was blown away that he would say this and that he would actually think that it wasn't coming off in a way. And I've had people tell me, well, why is he getting suspended for using his First Amendment rights, but then guys in the NFL who are kneeling, it's okay, which this is completely night and day different on those two things.
It's like comparing apples and bowling balls. They're not even both fruit. I mean, you have a guy who is for want of a better term, just kind of popping off at the mouth, or fingers, if you will, on Twitter about something that's going on across the country, completely doesn't involve him, something that he's really using sort of, I don't want to say conspiracy theorist ideology when he says things like Black Lives Matter is pathetic again. Obama, you're pathetic once again. First of all, as a public figure, there has to be a line that you don't cross, especially when you're talking about the commander-in-chief. And to call the commander-in-chief pathetic,
right?
If you should be locked behind bars like animals.
And you and I know, and we've been taught this for years. The way that you and I mean, and I get our views on things are vastly different in some respects. But at the end of the day, we always knew that you respect the office or you respect the rank. It was one of the best lines from the miniseries We Were Soldiers. Is when
not We Were Soldiers.
I'm sorry, you're right. Band of Brothers.
Band of Brothers.
Yeah, when Band of Brothers, when the character, when Dick Winters tells Captain Sobel, we salute the rank, not the person, because his former CO was just so upset.
Right. And there's been a lot of that for the last 8 years. A lot of that just utter, outright disrespect of the office of the President of the United States. Regardless of how you feel about the man who sits in the chair, you respect the office, and that seems to have fallen by the wayside in the last 8 years. And people have a lot to say about this disrespect of, and I'm going to use quotations, quote, disrespect of the military, because I don't think of it as a disrespect of the military when somebody kneels for the national anthem personally. As a member of the U.S. Army, as a veteran of the war in Iraq, I don't think of it as a disrespect to the military for several reasons. First being that the military doesn't own patriotism. Patriotism is not just the domain of the military. Every single citizen owns the right to patriotism, and every single citizen owns the right to express their sort of frustration with the government of the United States, which is what the flag represents. The flag doesn't represent the military. They have the right to show that sort of disgruntled or frustration with the government of the United States in any peaceful way they deem. And what could be more peaceful than simply kneeling during the national anthem? The guys aren't out there, making comments to start riots. They're not advocating violence. They're protesting violence. And that's their First Amendment right. And as a member of the armed services, I fought to guarantee the rights of all citizens, and that is their right.
Right.
I didn't only join to defend rights of people that I agree with.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing here. And he released a statement, obviously, to Steve Clevenger, as we're speaking. He released a statement to apologize and I guess attempt to clarify things. And I understand that. I think no matter how much we try, everyone has certain ideas about things, certain judgments about things that are going to be wrong. But here's this quote. This was a statement he released, and I'll read it verbatim. Quote, "First and foremost, I would like to apologize to the Seattle Mariners, my teammates, my family, and the fans of our great game for the distraction my tweets on my personal Twitter page caused when they went public earlier today. I am sickened by the idea that anyone would think of me in racist terms. My tweets were reactionary to the events I saw in the news and were worded beyond poorly at best. and I can see how and why someone could read into my tweets far more deeply than how I actually feel. I grew up on the streets of Baltimore, a city I love to this very day. I grew up in a very culturally diverse area of America, and I am very proud to come from there. I am also proud that my inner circle of friends has never been defined by race or by content of their character. Any former teammate or anyone who has met me can attest to this, and I pride myself on not being a judgmental person. I just ask that the public not judge me because of an ill-worded tweet. I do believe that supporting our First Amendment rights and supporting local law enforcement are not mutually exclusive. With everything going on in the world, I really just want to be what is best for everyone, regardless of who they are. I just want what is best for everyone, regardless of who they are. I, like many Americans, are frustrated by a lot of things in the world, and I would like to be a part of the dialogue moving forward to make this a better world for everyone. I once again apologize to anyone who was offended today, and I just ask you not judge me off of a social media posting. Thank you, and God bless everyone, end quote. A lot of stuff there, Chris. I'm going to give you the floor on this. I don't know really. I don't know what to think. I understand what he's saying, but they all often say when you're angry that oftentimes shows who you really are as a person, shows your real character. And I mean, what he said and the way that he said, I get that Twitter's only 140 characters, but I mean, that was pretty direct and pretty succinct. And
right.
I don't really know how you don't take what he said at what it was at face value.
Yeah, it's hard not to look past the words that he used and see the mentality that it comes from, right? It's hard not to look past how he said it and see really what he's saying. And as someone who spends a lot of time sort of close reading as an English major, critical reading of writings is a huge portion of what I do as a student, what I plan to do as a teacher and a professor. And so you have to look back. You have to look through the direct wording of something, and you have to be able to see what the meaning is. And it's hard not to look through those words and see it coming from a place that's not just very sort of dark and almost hate-filled. I'm not going to go out and say, I'm not going to go as far as to say that Clevenger doesn't like a certain group of people, or that Clevenger is racist against a certain group of people, or racist in general. I will say that those posts came from a very racially biased point of view, a very racially biased place. Whether it was reactionary racism or, sort of an institutionalized racism within himself, I don't know, but it definitely doesn't make his later statement, his apology statement, ring true in the least. And I will say this, that when people who did know him in the past were asked about it, they kind of blew Clevenger off, really. His teammates, his past teammates were asked about it, and basically guys like Adam Jones said, I know the guy, but we're not friends. 99% of guys you come across in the locker room aren't your friends. But I never heard him say anything like that, but that doesn't mean that he wouldn't. Buck Showalter refuses to make a statement because he doesn't really know what to think. He thinks that it was definitely terrible.
And
in fact, Buck Showalter says, do I have a reaction? Yeah. Am I going to state it publicly? No. Still kind of collecting my thoughts on it. Obviously, it wasn't good, and that's putting it mildly.
And coming from a guy who had to deal with, I believe it was this year, had to deal with, playing a game, and actually it may have been last year, I don't recall, but when Camden Yards was basically, there was a game played empty because of all the protests on the street. I understand, and I've heard some guys compare it to this, and I understand that people say, well, the protesters were acting like animals the way that they were out of control. I have no problem understanding, I think, what he was intending, but the way that he aggressively approached what he was saying, kind of like we've seen with some guys, the message that he wanted to say that he thought was misworded, misrepresented, and completely was lost. I want to say, I want to believe that what he was trying to say is that, this whole idea of peaceful protesting because of one person get shot because of this, now it's become, there's more violence than there was originally, but kind of like we said in the past, there are ways to say things, and even with Adam Jones, we discussed with Adnan Burke.
I mean,
there are ways to make a point and be more part of the solution than just shooting your mouth off, stating your opinion of why things are so messed up. We all know that things are messed up. So if you have that big of a stage because you're playing in the big leagues and you're not a huge player, but you have a uniform, you have a name, a voice, why don't you use it in a way to try and calm things, not to incite more issues because you don't like the way that these people are handling the situation in their backyard that you're 3,000 miles away from.
And here's the thing. This isn't Clevenger's first rodeo with this problem. This isn't the first time that Steve Clevenger has made a statement like this that was racially charged like this. It's just that the last time, nobody really said anything about it. But if you look back through Steve Clevenger's history, not just on Twitter, but also on Facebook, there's a post, and I'm going to read it verbatim. So I apologize in advance for some of the language that's involved. I won't say any of the worst words, but Stephen Clevenger responded to a post made by Ann Coulter. Now, we won't get into how I feel about Ann Coulter because I don't have that much time. But Steve Clevenger responded to a post made by Ann Coulter who said, and he said, and I quote, "How dare I get mad at our country that gives free Obama phones out while I bust my ass. I come from the inner city. My mother taught me not to be a lazy ass. She taught me to work hard for things, and it's paid off. Now I got to pay tons of taxes, in which I'm okay with paying my dare," spelled incorrectly, I assume he meant fair, "share. And for what? To watch these Black Lives Matter groups bitch that they're treated unfair. They got shot holding guns and still protest. And people on here have the audacity to tell me that this country is great right now. Ha ha, what a joke. Like I said before, if you follow BLM, you're trash to me. It's a racial group no different from the KKK. But the way they allow them to tear down their own cities and violate white people with no consequences, and the reason is because there's white people like you who support them." End quote. That was in August. And so obviously this is not the first time that Clevenger has made these sorts of comments, and reading that in sort of in the view of his apology statement makes his policy statement sound like BS to me. It makes it sound like a kid who got caught with his hand in the cookie jar, and the only thing that he's sorry for is that he got reprimanded.
Yeah, I mean, there is certainly, wow. I mean, there is something deeper rooted here than, like you said, that we don't really have time to get into. This isn't really the place as much for that. But I guess the question that I want to ask you more so than, our thoughts, I guess, on this is, what do you think about the Mariners suspending him? I don't believe that there's going to be any type of appeal, but could there have been?
Well, I think he could have appealed. I don't think that it would have gotten very far. To be honest with you, I not only don't believe that he should be in a Mariners uniform, I don't think that he should be in any baseball uniform. I think that his ideology and rhetoric has no place in Major League Baseball. It has no place in society, and that he should have been released from the Mariners and not just suspended without pay. Although, to be honest with you, releasing him might have been the way to get him. Releasing him might have forced the team to pay him. Although he was playing on a non-guaranteed contract. But I think he should have been released. I don't think he should have been suspended. I think that the Mariners should have cut him.
I don't think that I highly doubt we'll see him in a uniform again next year. I'll be interested to see if we see him in even Major League Baseball next year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody's going to want to take that on.
So as we kind of transition into something a little bit lighter, I want to ask you a question, and this is, let me apologize first. We didn't discuss this prior. I kind of wanted to get a bit of a gut reaction from you. Nothing that's going to put you in a situation where we're going to harm any of the young listeners that we may have on the air. So this is not anything to do with what we talked about. This is completely something different. Actually, going more to our yearly awards. Okay. So the Chicago Cubs are clearly the odds-on favorite right now to win the World Series. We have seen the New York Mets absolutely decimated by injury, especially in net rotation. Right. And there is a strong possibility right now that they are going to keep the number one spot, and unfortunately, there's also a kind of decent possibility that the Giants may end up getting bounced because they're playing the Dodgers for a couple more games, and this is Vin Scully's last weekend. Right. With the fact that the Mets have been able to hold on and potentially secure a playoff spot, could you see Terry Collins beating out Joe Madden for Manager of the Year honors? No. Okay.
No, because that would indicate to me that the Mets are winning based on his ability to manage the game. And realistically, right now, the Mets are holding on based on their offense. It's kind of hard to lose games even with a bad rotation, unless you're the Giants, when you're scoring 12 runs. Did you catch that? Did I say that out loud? I didn't mean to.
Yeah, I'm fairly sure that that little dig came from a dark-seated place of fear and despair, Chris.
Yes. It's hard to lose games when you're scoring 12 runs. I mean, you got, half their rotations hurt, but when Giannis Cespedes is still hitting the ball 3 miles, and you got guys hitting walk-off grand slams and everything that could possibly go right for the Mets at the plate is going right for the Mets right now. So they're digging in with their fingernails and they're holding on. And what I was alluding to earlier was The other day, the Giants had an 11-run lead against the Rockies, took out their starting pitcher, and I immediately thought, well, the game's over now, as the bullpen took over. Because, yes, I did believe that the bullpen could lose an 11-run lead. But the offense is firing on all cylinders, and that's not the manager's doing. That's the players digging in.
Okay.
Whereas the Cubs have won 101 games this season based on how their games have been managed. I mean, we have seen things this season in Chicago that have dug in to the depths of the baseball rule book. In fact, just the other day we saw something where you had Rizzo come down the line to prevent a bunt, and you had the second baseman come over to hold the runner onto first, and they had to stop the game and have the players change gloves because technically they had changed positions, and now Anthony Rizzo jokes that he gets to put on his Twitter that he is a first baseman and a second baseman because he had to take off his first base mitt, put on a non first base glove, and prevent the bunt, which he didn't do. Unfortunately, the bunt was successful.
Now, I want you to think about something here, and I want you to think about, since you bring up the Cubs. And this is from Bob Bainter. He oversees the Northwoods League. It's a league up in kind of the Midwest North area. It's a good umpire league, big baseball guy. And he put this on Facebook about a little less than a month ago. And I want you to think about this as we get ready to go into the postseason. And we're going to, unfortunately, have to kind of kick ourselves a little bit on some of our picks. The Cubs were 45-13 against Milwaukee, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and all interleague teams on their schedule. Right? I mean, fantastic record against guys that are, that are basically in your division, and all the other teams. Against the two division leaders in the National League and the three wild card contenders, the Dodgers, the Nationals, the Cardinals, the Mets, and the Giants, they were a whopping one game over 500. So I am not at all saying that there is no chance here. It's an interesting statistic. I'm curious to see what happens because I'm going to ask just kind of for, my this is just me hoping. So the Tigers close out the season in Hotlanta, okay? And Atlanta definitely has not been that hot. Obviously, the Tigers are my pick for second wild card, and the Mariners were yours. And to be fair, both of our teams have a shot. The Mariners are playing the A's. The Tigers are a game and a half out. The Mariners are 2 games out. Man, do you think that there's any possibility with the Blue Jays playing the Red Sox? I mean, pretty much it's an AL East matchup, for the top 4 teams. The Rays are obviously out of it. Do you think anybody besides the Orioles and the Blue Jays finally makes it in? Do you think we have a chance of getting one of our picks to be right, or are we pretty much just kind of embarrassed?
Well, I don't know that we're embarrassed. I think we took some risks with some of the teams that we chose based on some of the things that were happening at the time.
Fair. Yeah, I mean, I think all of our teams are going to make it in. The Dodgers and the Giants flip spots, but we should have, most of our teams should all be, in the postseason.
I think the Mariners are probably the team that we agreed on that aren't going to make it. It just looks like, they're still clinging to that possibility, but they're 2 games out of a wild card spot at this point. Now, Detroit has a tough row to hoe in terms of who they are playing over the next few days. I mean, the Mariners
Detroit's playing Atlanta.
Yeah, but we've seen Atlanta do some damage to some pretty good teams.
Yeah.
I mean, to say that they're playing Atlanta it's like, yeah, they're playing Atlanta, who has a terrible record, but we've also seen Atlanta late in this season already once try to play spoiler to the Dodgers. You know?
And I mean, and they would have to sweep the Braves. I mean, for all intents and purposes, you know, if there is going to be something, I mean, they're going to have to win. You know, I mean, they really need to sweep the Braves and then hope that either the Blue Jays or the Orioles can lose 2 out of 3. You know, and then have a chance. I mean, it's a long shot, but it's still, you know, possible.
And at this point, with Seattle playing Oakland, which you can't look past Oakland either. Oakland's not one of those teams that you can just say, okay, we got this, but a little bit more than Atlanta, I would say.
Right.
But they're only half a game back of Detroit by virtue of the fact that Detroit's played one less game.
Right.
So, for all intents and purposes, Detroit and Seattle are tied at 85 wins. And if Baltimore or Toronto, you know, especially Toronto, I mean, there's a very real possibility that Boston, coming off of this sort of run that they've been on with getting swept by the Yankees, and then losing to Baltimore, Toronto lost to Baltimore, but Boston getting swept by the Yankees, there's a very real possibility that they're going to come back and sweep Toronto. Because
especially with it being I think it's Poppy's last homestand too. So I mean, there's going to be a lot of emotionally charged in there.
It's his last homestand prior to what could possibly happen in the postseason, because they're 2 games back of full home field advantage to Texas at this point, but they're going to get home field in the wild card, in the divisional series more than likely. But it's his last regular season homestand. They're coming off of some tough losses against the Yankees. They're going into a game against a divisional rival that they really want to beat in these last 3 days. So Seattle playing Oakland, I think, might have a shot at eclipsing Detroit and maybe sliding into that second wild card slot if Seattle can play the way they've been playing for the last. So you think the Mariners have a better chance of getting in than the Tigers do right now? Yeah, well, I think that the Tigers are playing well. They beat Cleveland.
I mean, both were winners of their last 2. The Tigers are 7-3, and the Mariners are 6-4 in their last 10 games.
Right. But I think the Mariners had the better September overall. And they had those 2 runs where they were winning 8 and 9 games in a row. I think, for my money, based solely on the fact that they both have 85 wins, I think when it's all said and done, Seattle has the better shot of being at 87 or 88, whereas Detroit has a better shot of being at 86.
Okay. Well,
I think that Atlanta's probably going to play spoiler to Detroit this year.
Okay. Well, the beauty of it is we've got 3 big games or 3 big days over the weekend to figure it out, and then we roll into next Wednesday, and it's wild card time, man. So a lot of stuff going on. Hopefully, guys, we're going to have another interview for you next week in between the wild card going into the divisional rounds.
Also, let's not forget that Baltimore and Toronto are tied for the wild card at this point,
right.
Which means if they remain tied, that means a playoff.
Well, I believe it goes head-to-head first, and depending on who has a lead in the head-to-head matchups, that would dictate home field advantage over the other, I believe. We'll see. I don't think we'll get a 163rd game just to determine home field advantage. No. I have to think that it's not going to be a perfect split. So one team should be able, likely Toronto, to go over the top. So, like I said, we hope if it comes down to that, our hope obviously is Toronto that wins, just because we want to see another Toronto-Texas matchup. We had fireworks last year. We've already had fireworks and punches this year. Let's see what happens. So, man, another a great show to really round out the regular season. A lot of our stuff was, a little bit on the older side, but sometimes situations dictate that. Again, we apologize for any technical difficulties you might have heard on our audio end. We're trying to get those fixed long term for you guys. And don't forget to check us out at OO Left Field and Out of Left Field, hosted by Graham and Chris on Twitter. Don't forget, guys, we are part of the Grueling Truth Network. Head over to thegruelingtruth.net. Take a look at all of our college football stuff, NFL, fantasy football, obviously Out of Left Field, our shows, baseball power rankings, and a whole lot more. Check them out, again, thegruelingtruth.net, at Grueling Truth on Twitter, and The Grueling Truth on Facebook. That's The Grueling Truth, where legends speak. Guys, we are proud to be part of them. We have their help with that here, putting us on for you guys to listen to every week. Don't forget, we love your feedback. So, again, please check us out Out of Left Field on Facebook and at OO Left Field on Twitter. Without anything else, man, a bunch of stuff going on. We've got storylines galore to bring us into next week, and I have a pretty good feeling that out of everything we've got going on the next couple of days, we're going to find a couple of things in Major League Baseball coming straight out of left field. We'll see you guys next week.